Do you want to know how to be coachable? Do you know what it takes to be somebody that can be coached easily and to overcome challenges within dog sports? Well, if so, join me on today's episode of Lifting All Ships, where I talk to my good friend Dan Shaw about being coachable. Okay, welcome to today's episode of Lifting All Ships. I'm talking to somebody that I hold near and dear and I've known for a considerable amount of time. We won't quibble over numbers just because it will tell you a little bit about our age. My dear friend, Dan Shaw, one of the many things that I call him, my little dandy. How the devil are you, Daniel?
I'm very good, Kamal. How are you?
Yeah, excellent. You are looking fabulous as per always. Your hair,
Thank you.
can I
I've had
just
a
can I
haircut.
just
I've
take
had a
note of your
haircut
hair?
for the occasion, so I'm pleased that you've noted that. Thank you.
Excellent. And your skin is as usual looking flawless. You've obviously had something done to it.
Thank you. That was a facial this morning as well. I'm living a very hard life today.
Yeah, it sounds it. Hair done and facial, just the manicure to go and you'll be all good. So I wanted to obviously talk to you because you are a dog sports coach professionally, but probably a lot of people don't know of how you started in the world of dog training, and your journey into dog sports, and specifically where you actually learnt your craft, so to speak, with teaching people. So just a little bit of background, those that don't know you, you have been doing agility for how long?
So Cody's going to be 16 this year. So I'd say 16 years of doing competitive agility.
Right.
Before that, bless little Hattie was dragged around courses probably for maybe like 4 or 5 years.
Right.
So yeah, I'd say maybe about 20 years, something like
Wow.
that, around playing agility. Um, Before that, just playing generally in dog training and kind of going on dog training courses and being generally obsessed. But yeah, I'd say something about 20 years.
Wow, that's amazing. God, that time is ridiculous, isn't
Don't
it?
look old enough, do I?
No, absolutely not. You're merely a child. So, how did it all start for you then? I mean, you had a passion for dogs. Obviously, you had your lovely Hattie, and that sparked your interest. But what was the first experience of being taught formally about dog training then?
So one of my mum's really great friends at the time was a obedience competitor and judge, and she was like really close family friend. So we got Hattie, and I don't remember us going to like puppy classes or anything like that, but we just had this friend come around every week, and she taught me maybe not how you would do competitive obedience, but I would say a form of competitive obedience weekly. And I had like this little half an hour one-to-one, and she'd bring her dog and I would train that a little bit, and then she'd show me what to do with Hattie. Um, and she was kind of forward thinking, I think. She was super motivational and reward based. And I was literally absolutely obsessed. And I would spend the whole week just being out in the garden doing the homework, and the next week being like, right, now what are we going to do? Can we do longer
Wow.
sit stays? Can we do more exciting hill work? And I was literally just hooked on it. So I was super lucky. And then in the same location where I first met you, those many moons ago, our mutual friend Kay, she trained on the Common, super obedience competitor and trainer, and I would just sit there, probably being super annoying, and just watch her train her dogs for hours and be like, "Oh my god, this is amazing!" And you guys would all be there training your dogs, and I was just like absolutely obsessed. Anywhere I could watch dog training, I would, and I felt like I was super lucky to have these influences around me that just kind of helped me along the way.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a bit of a fluke, really, isn't it? Like how life works. I mean, one, your mum's closest friend is into dog sports because this is a weird and eclectic mix, a world of people. And then obviously living on a common with our good friend, our mutual friend, who's now passed, Kay Raven, who was a long-term obedience competitor. She'd also trained dogs extensively for film work and media, so a vastly experienced trainer and been in it decades. And to have those two in your orbit was just probably just a bit of luck and the universe working for you. So at that time, what was the biggest takeaways then as somebody learning about dog training and dog sports that like got you passionate? Because obviously you had a passion, but what is it that they gave you that really spurred that on and from a coaching point of view and a teaching point of view?
I think you see when you're watching maybe with an untrained eye, people doing things with in dog training, and it looks almost magical because you don't really understand the process behind it. And the more, it's like anything, the more you study anything and the more time you invest into something, you see that actually there's no magic involved at all. It's basically just hard work and increased knowledge. And I think that's what got me hooked. I would have been doing something with dogs anyway. Even if I hadn't got hooked onto dog training, I would be showing them in the ring. I'd be doing doing something with them. So yeah, I think they showed me, started off with what I thought was magic, and then they showed me how to create the magic. So yeah, that was probably my little inspiration from those guys.
Yeah, it was amazing, really, like how things could happen. So obviously, for you at a personal level, it then snowballed. You obviously got Hattie, and you got more and more involved in dog sports, and then you got Cody. So when you got Cody, was your intention always to do agility with him?
So by this point, before I even knew anything about dog training, this is how weird I was about wanting to do this. I used to hire the village hall, which was like £8 an hour or something like that.
Yeah.
I'd had no dog training knowledge, by the way, and I just invite my friends to come with their dogs, and bless their hearts, they would come, and I would just be teaching them to do things with their dogs before I had any knowledge whatsoever. So then Leslie Young, who's still in agility now, does really good with her current dog. She somehow we got introduced to each other, and she took me under her wing, and she was absolutely incredible at teaching me how to actually be a dog trainer and how to teach people. And she took me on courses, and she invested so much time into teaching me how to coach. So I guess at that point, when I was doing some work for Leslie, she had 3 red border collies, and I was like, this is what I want. So I rocked up to a dog training course. Pretty sure it still goes, called the Pet Dog Training Institute. So you rock up and you spend like a week there, I think. And Cody's breeder was there with her bitch in pup, and I was just like, oh my god, I love this dog. And Sue was brave enough to give an 18-year-old, 17-year-old boy a puppy. So got him with definitely the intention of doing something. The club I trained for Leslie was primarily probably like pet and behavior, but it definitely had a side of agility. So yeah, that's how agility happened.
Wow. So at that point, what would you say then was your I mean, obviously that takes a lot of guts to sort of go, okay, I'm gonna invite people around and start teaching with, with great intentions, but probably not the most extensive amount of knowledge. What was the thing but then to be fair, like you, that was, I mean, obviously I know this of the time, etc. But your club was really, really successful, like in terms of, not necessarily in terms of competitively, but in terms of as a business, it actually was really, really, really successful. You always had a really good sense of community. You had a really good business there. You were always inundated with people. So what do you think was what do you think that was then?
That made us so busy.
Yeah, and what was the success behind it then? What do you think was the secret to that, to your ability to connect with people?
No, I definitely think that's a skill that people tend to either have or not have, is that they can read people immediately. And I think so when I first started teaching, and I was just teaching 100% pet people, that's really easy market to gauge. They kind of want the same thing. Everyone wants the same thing from their dog. They want it to come back when it's called. They want it to walk, to heel, whatever, the basic behaviors. My job now, where I'm just coaching agility people, for me, that's much, much harder to gauge, because when people walk in, I have to almost immediately know, are they at this session because they want to be the absolute best agility competitor they can be, and they actually want some home truths to make them better, or do I need to like nurture this person a little bit? Because yeah, they probably want to do as well as they can, but they're not going to kill themselves to get to the top. I hope that I do a good job. Obviously sometimes we all get it wrong, but that's probably the hardest skill. I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think to be honest, our job is really about relating to people. I think that I would say that's the hardest thing. And I'd say certainly, I don't think I could have done it at your age, if I'm truthful. I did teach people relatively young. I mean, I took my first class when I was about 12. And I just remember thinking, I look back now and think, what precocious 12-year-old is telling people how to train their dogs? It was only because I could do it better than anybody at the club at that time. They were just, because I was more, I suppose, more passionate about it. And I'd say that's the thing that I recognize in you. You're incredibly passionate about your dogs, dog sports, obviously agility now. But even when I first knew you, were really passionate about your dogs, you know what I mean, and dogs in general. So I think that was the thing that, knowing of you in at that time, I think it was passion. And you, the thing that you, I think that, I don't know whether you'd say this of yourself, you're a people's person, you know, like you're really good at talking to people, connecting with them, and you're good at sort of engaging with them, and being, you know, you're charming by nature. So I think that
Oh,
really helps you. But
love it.
when what do you think? Because there was a real, at that time, I mean, you had a real sense of community in that club. With certainly when, so you went from Leslie and then you created D-Force, which was your own
Yeah.
club. And D-Force was really successful. I mean, like you had your own little, when you hadn't actually done much in agility, you still had your little followers, as it were, really. So what,
Yeah.
how do you think that happened? Because I mean, clearly now you're doing it on a, you know, a more specific and, should we say, grander scale, but you had something then. So what do you think it was then? And if somebody was watching this, what is the thing that you had that you think, or learnt to have or develop?
I loved that period of time because I think dog training generally was going through a huge change. So I came into agility and was like, wow, there's quite a lot of handedness, can't say it, but maybe even just as an example, people scruffing their dog on the start and things like that. And for me, I'd never been exposed to that because I'd been so lucky with the dog trainers that I'd grown up watching. Um, so I think for a lot of people that had been in the sport for way longer than I had, or even our newbies that came in, they were like, oh my God, this is such a happy and positive place because if something's not going to plan, we're going to come up with a positive way to fix it. And I don't think that was the norm at the time. I think positive reinforcement was around, but it was always backed up by a degree of punishment somewhere on the line. So I think people just really enjoyed that wasn't the case in our club. And that we kind of took on basically any problems and whatever, and we dealt with it in quite a fun way. And yeah, I think the community helps. As soon as you've got a couple of people within a club
Mhm.
that are having a great time and they promote it and people see them doing well as well, things go great. So I think people saw our beginners coming up through grades one and they were like, wow, these dogs are amazing. And a lot of those dogs that started in my foundation groups as pets, okay, not a lot, that's pushing it, but a handful of those people have gone on to win tickets. So
Well, I mean, okay, so on that note, so Liv Pats, well, she's Pats now. She was, oh God, what was she before? That's
I think
terrible.
I think she was always Pat's. They've been married a long time, those guys.
I thought, no. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But Livia Pats, who has a dog that you are now taking to the World Championships. She was, you know, she is a great example because I can remember her at your field with, you know, her first couple of
Leo, yeah.
dogs, learning about agility when she was, I think she was in grade one. I don't even know if she'd
She
been competing.
she rocked up to watch our class 'cause she was watching some obedience lessons and she just thought, I don't maybe she was doing some. Don't This is for me. I want something a bit more
Yeah,
busy
yeah.
and runny aroundy. So she came to watch and I was like, we actually haven't got any starters groups happening for one. She came week after week after week to watch. And I'm like, I see traits of myself there a little bit in that dedication. Then we started to fit her in for lessons and then she got absolutely hooked. But the number of students that we've taken from beginning their dog sports and they're now making a living out of the dog
Mm.
sport and it's their life and it's their passion and they love it is absolutely incredible. It makes me so proud of them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as I said, I can remember clearly, like her, like you said, she was so hungry to learn and she was so passionate because didn't you used to use was it her dad's field at one point?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, when I lived back there, so when I was first trying to form the business, the number of venues I got through was
Yeah.
unbelievable. So yeah, we'd be up there, but surrounded by these massive £1 million houses who quite clearly don't want agility dogs barking in their garden. See, we knew we were on a time frame,
Yeah.
so then we quickly moved off. But yeah, that was Liv's dad's house.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, I mean, you think now you look back, you know, and all those times. Like obviously, you had Chipperfield, the hall at Chipperfield, where you run your puppy classes, and then the various fields, the one around the back of the pub, and then Liv's dad's field. And like you say, you just kept moving around. And then these random fields that'd be there for a couple of months, and then you'd have to move on. You look back now, and you think all those. I suppose all those challenges actually served you now, isn't it? Really, you know, when you've got a you have to be willing to adapt to a situation when that, you know, and you know, you didn't have like a big massive arena, you were like out in the grass, so it was what it was.
Yeah.
At that time, what would you say, you know, for I think sometimes people don't see they see the front end of now that you are inverted commas successful, and they don't see all the things that went before. So what would you say to anybody that's thinking of becoming a dog trainer, for example, about that process?
Rephrase the question for me, Kamal. Sorry, I'm being so stupid.
What I meant to say is, so if somebody was to approach you tomorrow and wanted to be a dog trainer, not
Yeah.
necessarily, but dog trainer, and you and I know of all the hard work that you put in to get to the position that you are now. Hard work as in time, energy, passion, flexibility in terms of, dealing with things on the fly, standing out there in a muddy field when it's chucking it down, the various things that happen, like that happens with dog trainers. What would you say about that to people? I mean, for me, it's like, I suppose, what am I getting at? For me, I feel it's like, I think the perception is that people think it's always going to be smooth sailing. Like you go, right, I'm going to be a dog trainer and that's it. I'll be playing with dogs all day and that's it. I go home and it isn't like that at all. So what would you say about that experience to people thinking about being dog trainers?
I would always say, if it's your passion, do it.
Mhm.
Be prepared to make compromises. So, and you're going to have to sacrifice on certain areas of your life. So I've always been very passionate that I want to maintain a friendship group outside of the dog world, because I think it gives me a sense of reality rather that sometimes I might lack. Um, that's really hard to do because I compete every single weekend. I could potentially teach every single weekend. In fact, teaching would be the busiest days to weekends would be the busiest days to teach. So you have to be aware that maybe at the beginning you have to give up a little bit of that friendship life, or whatever life you've got, and you have to just take the work when it's there and work and plow through. So there's definitely going to be some tough times. Now I'm in a much more fortunate position, right? Because I actually don't want to work weekends. I want to see people that are really important to me when I'm not competing. But I couldn't do that in the beginning. I couldn't be that fussy. I had to take the work when it was there.
Mhm.
And I think the other thing in an area of when you're working with something you're passionate in is you give a lot of yourself. So to my regular students, I give a lot of myself. Like, I'll phone them and I'll chat to them as I would with friends. Most of them I would class as friends.
Mhm.
Um, but that can mean things hurt more. So I imagine if you have a normal job and someone has an issue, or they
Mhm.
betray you in whatever way, it hurts, but it's not the end of the world. But when it's something you're really passionate about, it can be hard. So just maybe be prepared for those moments.
Mhm.
But I also would imagine that would happen anywhere in life. So I would say go for it, because in the summer it's the best job. In the winter you will occasionally question your life choices.
I wish you had cats. Yeah. So
Yeah.
on that note, because you're absolutely right, talking about coachability, I think that certainly you and I definitely we get very involved and invested into our students. It isn't just for a paycheck. It isn't just for the lesson fee. It is, for me, I'm very much part of their process. I'm very much in their corner, and I want them to succeed, and I want them to achieve whatever it is that they aspire to achieve. So, how do you, when times happen, as it has happened to all of us, when you have that person for whatever reason chooses to stop training with you, or has had a what use the term betrayal, if you want to call it that, or a breach of trust, whatever. Something has gone wrong with the relationship. How do you, as a coach, how do you rationalize that and then move forward?
Or I would like to think I've got better at it now that I'm older. I can definitely be guilty of being hot-headed. But I think now I try to come at things with a more rational view, and I think it's really not the end of the world. Like, if I would like to have hoped that over the years I've given them all the information. I'm not a trainer that's going to hold back
Mhm.
anything or have any secrets. I will have given them everything I have, and to try, and in an aim to make them as good as I can. Often my students beat me.
Mhm.
Um, I think in the past I've probably been quite hot-headed, but now I think things can remain civil without having somebody necessarily in your life. So realistically, in the dog sports world, I see most of these people most weekends throughout the summer. So if I can keep it civil and say hello in passing, I don't need to have them completely in my life if something's gone wrong along the lines between us. But I still want to be able to ask how their dog is, because I probably really cared for their dog, and I probably still want them to do well. Um, so yeah, I think get it to a point where you can just be amicable and try your hardest not to take it personally. There's going to become a point where they probably think someone out the grass is sometimes greener, and let them try it. Maybe they'll regret
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
it.
Or you know what? Sometimes maybe they'll actually find a better path for them. Either way, doesn't it, Dan? You know
Absolutely, yeah.
what? You know,
Absolutely.
I think that when you're first coaching people and you have that first experience where somebody chooses not to train with you, or that whatever, they end the relationship for whatever reason, I think it can sometimes hurt, and it can be a dent on your ego, you know, if you're being truthful at the time. And I think all of us have learned that lesson of, you know what, that's the way in which it works. And I always think you have to remain professional. You know, you've got to, don't make it personal if you can avoid it. You know, treat them, you know, as the same as you would any other client. Give 100% whilst you're working with them. And if they choose not to train with you, that's absolutely fine. That's their prerogative. You know, that's, I think, where you can keep the balance on it. So in terms of, was there a specific instance, or was there a specific situation where you had a really pivotal life, a lesson as a coach? Where was that? Can you remember, was there a particular student helping them overcome a challenge, or them, you know, a particular moment that really, really helped you as a coach, that's really steered you to who you are today?
I would say all of them somewhere along the line, because all of them we're going to be. I'm yet to have a student that's come to me and we've not had to work on an issue.
Wow.
We have to work on something, whether it's in how they perform, or their nerves, or how they train their dogs is probably the most common thing, like making them a better dog trainer, or their handling. So every single student somewhere along the line has taught me a lesson that's helped my competing dogs for sure, or made me a better coach. Off of the top of my head, um, I've had dogs where at one point maybe you think, is this dog ever going to be able to be in a ring? And when you get those dogs with maybe more behavioural issues, they're dog reactive, or they're fearful, or they have no drive, and you then see them go out there and smash it. I think they're the ones that give you the most motivation.
Yeah.
I quite like those little challenges.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I would agree. I think for me, those are more gratifying and more I have a bigger sense of achievement with those clients than the ones that have a very talented dog with a good, and they're, you know, a talented handler. Obviously, you feel invested with those clients as well, but there's something really special when you feel like, you know, almost there's a chat, like you say, there's a challenge where you don't even think, no, if you're going to be able to resolve the issue or help them, and when you do, it gives you this bigger sense of accomplishment as from a coaching point of view. So what do you find is the most consistent challenge that you have as a coach then with your past and present students? What would you say is the most consistent challenge that you have?
With my regular students, I would say none, because our expectations of each other are very transparent. And once I have a regular student, they, touch wood, very rarely leave. So I keep them for a long time. So the new students coming in are quite rare, and old students leaving are also rare. So with that relationship, it's super easy. On the probably 2 or 3 days a week where I go to different venues and train people coming in for the first time, I would say probably the most, I don't even want to call it an issue because it normally just works itself out, but is people being really nervous. And they arrive and they're like, I'm so nervous to train with you. I'm like, you really don't need to be nervous. The worst that happens is your dog takes a poop in here and we're going to pick it up. Probably nothing worse than that is going to happen. And as time goes on, just use a little bit of humor. Things get so much better for those guys. But people do get nervous, and I think something that's really good as a coach is to put yourself into situations where you are doing something for the first time. So this sounds really pathetic and makes me sound really weak, but I remember on a friend's stag do, we went to do go-karting. Lad activities like that are completely out of my comfort zone. I'm like, no, take me to a spa. Then so we went go-karting and we were just having the talk at the beginning, and I was like so nervous, it was just like really, really odd. And I was like, actually, this is so important as a coach to be coached in uncomfortable situations, because it makes you realize what people think when they come training with you.
Yeah. Yeah. So what was okay, on that note, because you brought up, what were you like then when you first, obviously you're probably now your most influential agility coach is, you know, that old, what's his name? That one, something, what's his name? Starts with M, the second
The
name.
one that's on his Zimmer frame out there, that's David.
David. Oh, David. We love him dearly.
I was just Googling old people's homes. As you
So David Munnings, the one and only David Munnings, who also is your partner. So how was that initial, because you obviously, you know, your relationship was one of coach and student. What was the, like joking aside, Dave's been incredibly influential in your training and coaching, etc. What was the things that you felt he brought to the table as a coach then for you?
Um, Definitely a more competitive way of training.
Right.
I would say I very much played. So I think maybe I took Cody to him when he was like a year old, something like that. I would imagine he was that age. And before that, I had the aims of competing, but not necessarily thoughts in my head of being at the top of the sport.
Mhm.
So definitely taught me how to train and handle to be competitive. And at the time, and I would say they're there now, but without talking about saying the word so much, people had handling systems like you did Greg's handling system, or you
Yeah.
did Dave's handling system, or you did Lee Windiat's handling system.
Mhm.
Um, and they kind of very much had schools of people that followed those specific handling systems. So he taught me the rules of a handling system. Like I could list them off to you now, because each training day would start with them, and if it was regular people, it'd be like, well, one, or two, or three, and you. It makes it sound really strict, but it was a great way of learning and teaching you to handle. So definitely how to be a good handler,
Mhm.
although I do think I've got a long way to go there still. And how to train a dog consistently would be my view.
Wow, those are two things, massive things. I mean, joking aside, I mean, I'm banter with Dave all the time, but Dave is a phenomenal dog trainer. And thing that have said, and I say it openly to him and about him, he has a fantastic relationship with these dogs. Absolutely, like he adores his dogs, and his dogs genuinely adore him. And you and I both know, hasn't always been the easiest path with some of the dogs that he's had. He's had to really work at that relationship, but he always gets it by hook or by crook. He will get that dog so into him, it would
Yeah,
do anything he asked him
I
to.
think he's probably the most determined person I've ever met. So
Oh, really?
I think what happens with some people is they'll be faced with a problem dog, and they back away, which sometimes can work. That can be a really cool technique. Give the dog some space, let it mature.
Yeah.
That for Dave is like a trigger to work harder. So he'll find something, he's like, right, I'm going to get rid of that problem. And then he will. And it will always happen. So like before, we've had puppies that have arrived at 8 weeks and they do something really strong border collie behavior like chasing shadows. And I'm thinking, that would panic some people. 2 weeks later, that problem will be gone.
Wow, really?
And he would have worked on it night and day, and that problem will be gone.
Yeah, it's that mindset, isn't it? And I think from a mentee or a coach, being coached, when you see somebody with that level of focus and that level of discipline, for me, that's the thing that I recognized in the people that really mentored me. Was my really good friend Val. Was when you see it in close quarters. So I'd go up on my summer holidays and stay at Val's house, and I would watch her interact with her dogs on a daily basis, and the discipline of how she would train with them, and even how she would look after them. Her care of them was like Jesus. Like this was a whole another league. I never realized, I didn't understand, or I hadn't seen anybody be so fanatical about the care of the dogs, the nutrition of the dogs, the conditioning of the dogs. Never mind the training. And then when she would train, it would be so disciplined, and she would be disciplined, and she'd be committed to, like, every single day she had she was running a business full time. She would structure her training around her working day. And when she had a young dog, it was an absolute masterclass in like discipline and dedication. I think that's what all the really successful trainers, or anybody, whether it's business, whether it's sports, they have discipline and consistency. And I think that's really what cuts them above. And you're absolutely right. It's when they have a struggle, they don't shy away from the struggle. It almost brings out a whole nother gear, or what I call another beast, as it were, really.
Yeah.
And I'd say definitely, like, Dave has that definitely in him. So what would you say was, moving forward, when you coach people, what is it that you think that you give to them that makes you unique as a coach then?
So I think every coach has their different styles.
Yeah.
I think in order for someone to have to be good, they have to be confident. If they're not confident, links back to the problem I talked about with people being nervous on arrival. They're not giving me their best in the session. They start jogging rather than sprinting, and whispering their cues rather than telling the dog the cues. And if they can give a cue. So I try to make my students very, very confident within the training environment, find their positives, compliment them on their positives, but this is what we're going to keep, and we're going to work on this bit here. So I think I'm quite good at, probably in the same way that I think one of my strengths in a dog trainer is building the dog. I think I'm quite good at building the student, because I want them to be really, really confident in order to be able to deliver their best. And I want to make them, what you were saying about Val, I think we almost want to make them obsessed. So I want to make them go away and think about every aspect of the dog. I don't want them to think my dog being good comes down to this hour on a Tuesday when I'm at run by. I want it to be everything that they've thought through. So my rules and my regulars are really simple. You arrive 15 minutes early, you warm up. If you're not there 15 minutes early, you miss the first 15 minutes of the session. Little drilling's the wrong word, but putting those little habits into people is just what starts to make them, I think, much better. They become more dedicated, they become more focused, there's thought in everything that they do.
Yeah, that's really, like, it's all those little things that I think that do help people, and I think it creates a culture, which, coming back to the original, what you definitely created within D-Force, and obviously now you've replicated in a slightly different entity, but it is that culture of success, whether that be getting your pet dog to come back when it's called, or get to the world team in agility. It's the culture within it. I think that's something that all coaches should take away, and as a person that's being coached, look to the person that you're coaching for, and take those little things, those things that really are, for me, the deciding factor. I think it's the things that they do, sometimes intentionally, sometimes unintentionally, or subconsciously, I should say. Like you say, just that good practice, turn up 15 minutes before, getting that warm up in before you start to train. Again, that's good practice. It's good, and it creates that energy within the group, isn't it? Everybody because what then happens is the people that are all there 15 minutes before, everybody's of the same, right, we're all getting ready, we're all preparing ourselves, right, we're intentional. So the second dance here, boom, we're off. And I think that's really, really good practice and good discipline. So in terms of struggles, what would you say is the biggest consistent struggle that you'd say within your sport of agility people make or have when they're first starting out on the sport?
I would say it's general dog behavior,
right?
Over arousal, the dog being able to cope in the environment. So and Christ, I've had dogs that I've worked on this with myself, so I know it's not easy, but I think consistently in young dog groups, I'll see dogs that would struggle to work with a dog working in close proximity. And let's face it, in agility competitions, some of our shows are 12 and 13 rings. That's something they really have to be able to do. But what's often fascinating with those dogs is if I clear the environment and I put some agility skills in there, they're amazing. So I just feel like perhaps sometimes the struggle is that there is an emphasis on doing the cool stuff before they've done the basic behaviors.
Yeah, I'd absolutely agree. I think the universal lesson that people venturing into a new sport make consistently, and we've all done it, is wanting to move on too quickly without having solid foundations. And I always equate dogs training and dog sports to building a house. If you don't have solid foundations, it doesn't matter. You could pick any color of wall coloring, and you can have a fantastic kitchen. You can have all singing or dancing electrics, etc. around the house, but it's going to fall down with a gust of wind if you don't have a really, really solid basis. And the ironic thing is, the more solid your basics are, the easier the more advanced stuff is, because it's just an extension of your foundation. Like the most simple thing, the dog bringing the toy back. I mean, I know, Dave, I think recently shared a reel about the importance of an informal play retrieve, the dog driving the toy back to you. That simple skill, people choose to overlook it, and then it has a domino effect to their ability to train their dog efficiently. Like, say, for example, I always use the example of weaves. The goal for weaves is to have fast, independent weaves, and the most effective way to reward the dog would be to throw the toy to the dog grabs it, and then you drive it back to you, and you have a game, and then you can repeat it, because that then is transferable to competition, because you're not having a lure out there where you're having to always place something out there, and so forth and so forth. However, if your dog doesn't bring the toy back, that then shapes your behavior, and now you're reluctant to deliver the toy to the dog because the dog's neither not going to bring it back, or you're going to have to get it into a rugby tackle to get it off the dog, either or. So now what happens is you then modify your approach. You think, well, what I'll do is I'll have a friend hold the toy. Well, then that's instantly going to be a deficit because you always need a second person to train with. Okay, I'm going to use food. Okay, food is great if you've got a really motivated dog, but now you've got to put either food on the floor or in a manners binder or an object, etc. And that in itself, you've got to fade those things. So before you know it, you end up affecting the quality of your weaves training, and it was never about the weaves. It was actually because you didn't train that foundation skill. And I think that's the biggest thing that I would say. My constant narrative to all my students is foundation, foundation, foundation. I cannot. It doesn't matter what sport I teach them to do. It's always the same thing. Get your basics right, really. How about you? What would you agree or disagree, or any thoughts on that?
Fully agree. So something I so often say to my students is when I look back to the dogs that I idolized in the sport when I started. So Dobby, Lucy Osborne's Ben, Sean's Eddie, Greg's Detox. They were the four that I really remember. I then remember watching those dogs leave the ring, and I remember watching them walk to the ring. Those dogs were impeccably well behaved, impeccably well behaved. And whether or not every dog can behave in the manner that those dogs can, those dogs were exceptional dogs. I'm not saying all dogs can, but I think that's something we can strive towards. So I know the dog that I initially focused the least on with life skills and the most on with agility was the one that I had the hardest journey on with agility. And the dogs that since and before I focused the most on with life skills and the least on with agility have been the better agility dogs.
So who was the dog that you focused? You did it the reverse way, that you focused more on agility.
So Ditto was my dog after Cody. So at this point, I've got the agility bug, and now I'm like, I really want to be as good as I can be. I won't hide the fact that I wanted her to be amazing at agility, and that was where my emphasis was. And I even probably thought at the time a little bit of naughtiness is actually drive. And I think there was a confusion in my head about probably over arousal and drive. So she was allowed to be a little feral monkey, and like when you look back now, I wouldn't change any of it. Like I love that that's the character that she had, but maybe things would have been easier if I had done a little bit of focus on teaching her to chill.
Yeah. It is. You know what? But then I think that's the beauty of dog sports, in that you're constantly learning. And I don't think you ever get a dog where, I know I haven't, where I ever go, oh my God, Kamal, you did an amazing job with that dog. I always think, oh, do you know what? In hindsight, I could have done that, and that with that dog. The hope is that you don't make the same repeated faults with each dog, and you hope that you learn from that specific dog. Whatever lesson it is that, that's really corny and cliche, but whatever lesson it is meant to teach you. And I'd say, that's the beauty of what we do, isn't it? It's about the constant lessons. No two dog is the same. You can get similar dogs and you can get similar problems, but then you hope that you either know how to handle them better, you learn from it. I think as a trainer, if you're consistently producing the same issue, then it's definitely time to look at what you're doing. It's interesting that you note the four people that you note: Dave, Sean, Lucy, and Greg. Those dogs were absolutely phenomenal, but those weren't the only dogs that they've had that have been phenomenal. And that's to me the secret in the success, in that all those people have had multiple dogs that have been phenomenal, like agility champion, world team members, etc. That isn't by luck. And I think that's where you've really got to look at those people and go, well, what is it that they do that's so different from maybe somebody that isn't being quite so successful? But yeah, I would, and now I think that it's fair to say that I'd say you put yourself in amongst those people for having, numerous successful dogs. And I think that's because of, one, the relationship that you have, and obviously the manner in which you raise and train them. So from your point of view, it's easy to look back now and think, dog sports is, it's given us both a fantastic life. It gives us a livelihood. It gives us a core group of friends, and what we would say was our most extended family. But it isn't always plain sailing. So from your own personal perspective, how do you deal with the ups and the downs of being a coach, being a professional dog trainer, being a competitor? How do you deal with those things then?
The hardest part in coaching is when the sport's not going well for yourself. Because there will be days when you think, oh my, like this, everything, and tends to happen in people's life that when one thing's go wrong, sorry, rather than one thing going wrong, everything goes wrong. So if you look at my year last year, I lost a young dog. I had a dog, my top dog, out with injury the whole year, building up to the World Championships. I had Nerd having multiple ops because he eats things and has things in his foot. And going to training days on some of those days is really difficult
Mhm.
because you have to love and be like, part of the reason people come to me is because I'm a motivating trainer. So
Mhm.
if I go stand in the middle, I'm like, yeah, next one, that was fine. You need to do this, but that's not what they're there for. So they have to have the energy. So for me, that's the hardest thing. And I was so tired, like so tired after those days, because you actually don't have any energy to exert, but you do if you want to do your job good. So I would say that's, for me, is the hardest days of coaching. What
Yeah.
about for you? Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, similarly, I'm quite when I have struggles, I'm quite private about those things. It's not my way to share it on social media, and that's my choice. And it's not my personality. So even when I've lost dogs, I tend to go very much. I tend to allow that. I need to process that, I suppose, is the best way of doing it. And I've done, I've lost dogs like Strut. I was due to work on the weekend. He unfortunately died on the Friday. And I was committed. There was people turning up, and I made a distinct decision not to discuss it or mention it to anybody until post the weekend, because I didn't want people asking me about it, etc., etc. And it was, looking back, it was tough to, go in there and put your brave face on. In a way, it helped because when you're in, I don't know about you, but when I'm in work mode, I just switch my mind on and I'm focused on my job. And it was
Yeah.
helpful in that sense, so I couldn't dwell on it. But it was definitely on the Monday afterwards. It was like a real, like, okay, that's when it really hit me.
Mhm.
But I think, that's the thing that people don't always see, that, they obviously want people that come to you, they want, your commitment, they want your 200%, and you absolutely endeavor to do that. But sometimes in what we do, because we're, you know, um, we are, we have to balance out being a professional with also being authentic, because there's something authentic of going, do you know what, I'm struggling in this moment, especially, and I think we've all had periods, and I've spoken to you about it. I think the trajectory of people when they come into the sport is, initially it's an upward process, but an upward progression, because you have no comparison. So it wouldn't matter really what dog you got or what sport you partake in. You are going to be successful, in inverted commas, because you have no comparison. So everything is an upward trend. Then what happens is that normally you get probably one or two, and if you're really lucky, three dogs that you normally about three, 2 to 3 is the general benchmark of where everything seems to, fall into place. So you've gone from knowing nothing, you've had that first dog, great, wonderful, and then you think, well, I have a little bit of knowledge, and you get one that's slightly better. And then normally what happens is everybody has a crash. And it can sometimes be the sport that gives you the crash. It can be life. Sometimes it's due to timing. So if you think logically, so like you look at the age that you started out in, you're now in your 20s slash coming up to 30. You're a different person now. Now with the simplicity, now you've got a job, you've got commitments. It's no longer just going to school and training your dog anymore. There's more to it. And I think that's what naturally happens. And I think it's at those moments when you've had, a period of time where you've had good fortune and success. So yeah, I think that the natural trend and the trajectory of anybody partaking in sports is that you do have, an upward initial progression, and then at some point you hit a slump. And I think that's really when it's important to, surround yourself with good people, and realize that it will pass. I think that's the thing. When it first happens to you, I think it can feel quite overwhelming, because you feel like, why is me? My dog's lame. My young dog's injured. God forbid something. I've lost the dog. Everything feels like it's coming on top of you. And in normal instances, if it was one dog, a dog gets injured, you would say, okay, it happens, etc. But then it feels like it's an accumulation of a lot of different things, and
Yeah.
then I think it can be overwhelming. So as an individual, how did you handle that period of time, and what would you advise people that are going through struggles then when they're in dog sports?
The first thing is, like we mentioned, have a very good group of friends around you.
Mhm.
I love I call them my agility family. Like, I'm so lucky with them, because if I have a dog meltdown, they completely understand. On the
Yeah.
flip side, I love having my non-dog friends, because when I go to them and have the meltdown, they're like, That's it. That's what it's all about. And
Yeah.
I quite
My
like
dog
that.
keeps having a pole. Oh, okay. Is that? Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. He can't get his weave entry. Oh, okay. I thought it's something important.
I quite like the comparison of the two. Um, I also think if it's a dog crisis you're having, like have your team of experts around you. Like I've formed that now,
Yeah.
and I can go to them for any dog meltdowns. And if you're in the hands of an expert, everything feels better.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think the I think the thing to say to people listening is that you've got to accept that dog sports, being coached, if you want to have aspiration to be, it isn't just always, as I said, it's not one from A to Z, and it's a constant upward progression. There will be ups and downs, and I think that's really where you find out who you are as a character. I think that's the beauty of dog sports. I think that's really why we get so involved with it, and why the people like that are nearest to dearest are from that world, because like you say, they can relate to you. When oh, my dog won't bring the toy back, it's oh, I get it, I can absolutely relate. Let's talk about it for 2 hours. Whereas most normal people would go, I don't understand the problem, my dog's never brought the toy back, he normally pees on it, and what's your problem? So I think that it's definitely good to surround yourself with people that you can relate to. So just as a final thing, so for anybody that's thinking about looking for a coach to help them in whatever it is that they choose to do, what are the qualities that you would say for them to look for?
I would say top of the list has to be someone that sits right or fits right with your morals regarding dogs.
Mhm.
So if you're purely very, very positive, make sure you find someone that is the
Mhm.
same, and they're not
Mhm.
going to ask you to do things to your dog that you feel uncomfortable with. So that would be the top of my list. Second thing is, can you work with them? So um, some people, they like their feedback to be fluffed up.
Mhm.
So the negative is still in there, but it's just in a little bit of a poopy sandwich. Don't go to certain trainers for that, because they're going to come at you with the truths quite hard. They're going to help you if you listen to them, but maybe you need someone more fluffy. So make sure you're picking someone. So pick somebody who you can work with. What else would I go for? I think you need to know whether you're someone that needs to be seen in person or online. I think the great thing now is you can access pretty much whatever trainer you want in the world and their specialist subject online. And I think that's why sports are progressing so quickly at the moment. Like agility is like this at the moment, and that has to be due to people being able to access the best in the world from their own home.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great point. So, for those of you that are interested, Dan does have his online agility geek online training, which is focused on young dogs for agility. But to be truthful, the content on that will benefit anybody that's interested in dog sports and wants to get off in the right foot. I will share the information on the description. I just want to bring things to the close by thanking Dan for his time. I joke and banter with him constantly, but he's one of my dearest friends. He is definitely one of the people that when times are hard, he's always been there for me, and vice versa, I'd like to think. And he is brilliant at what he does. If you have the opportunity to go and train with him, grab it with both hands. I'd absolutely echo that. He's great at motivation. He's incredibly passionate, and he loves dogs and dog training. So definitely check out his stuff. Dan, I just want to close by saying thank you for your time.
Always welcome.
Excellent. And now you can go and use that mirror in the background that we've been trying to. That's the elephant film. Do your hair and makeup. Is that
Have a lovely
hairspray
day.
by that mirror?
That is deodorant, but of course I do use hairspray.
Of course you do. Of course you do.
Yeah. You don't
All
want
right.
it kind of swishing when you do a front cross. It's got to be
All right. No worries. Thank you, Dan. Thank you
All
very much
right.
for your time. Take care.
Speak to you later. Bye bye bye.